hey, we know the Kepler team. You should hire them to help you get this together for now.
And just briefly, how does this external change connect with your proactive mission?
Well, I force change. I personally think there are so many good ideas in the world where everybody deserves a chance to at least fail.
How do you position yourself for this kind of serendipity?
I don't know if it's really positioning. I think it's about knowing two things. One, you don't know everything, so I have to keep my mind open. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a millionaire. And if we're working together as community, that's where things really change. And so if you can't be honest with me as your investor, I don't trust you.
Welcome back to our Health Tech Crew podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Shante Williams, a venture capitalist whose accomplishments span from medical breakthroughs to pioneering investment strategies. As the CEO of Black Pearl Global Investments, she is at the forefront of an initiative focused on health disparities across continents. Her journey from a scientist to executive to entrepreneur showcases her versatile brilliance. From intellectual property in electric drive vehicles to being a beacon for entrepreneurs, she's done it all. Dr. Shante's commitment to community reflected in her leadership roles in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Black Chamber of Commerce and board positions with Charlotte Symphony and Opera Carolina speaks volumes about her dedication to making a difference. Let's dive in and explore the multifaceted world of Dr. Shante Williams. Dr. Shante, thank you so much for joining me on the Health Tech Crew podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Very excited as well. So my first question is about your diverse portfolio of things. So you're a venture capitalist, you're involved in nonprofit work with the chamber, with various groups. So what drives you, especially in the fields of venture capital and healthcare?
What drives me is letting people or enabling people to have better lives. I feel every day very fortunate. So I grew up by outside standards poor, but I didn't know it. And it's very interesting. Like, I didn't know it, but if I talked to my parents, I was like, oh, we were middle class. And they go, what family did you grow up in? And it's amazing because the quality of my life, even though the numbers of my life were low, the quality of my life was quite high. I had a good family support system. I had, the ability to navigate the world. So in Charlotte, like, we had, the ability to, my parents were able to buy a house, and they had social capital, and I built community, and we had church, and, all of those things. So when I'm thinking about venture capital things, and I'm thinking about healthcare, so much of what creates a bad quality of life for a lot of us now is the quality of our health. So I can't afford to see a doctor. So, and my diet is bad. So that means I may have diabetes, or I may be suffering with a physical ailment, which means I'm navigating the world just at a deficit. And then if you're in the VC space, I personally think there are so many good ideas in the world where everybody deserves a chance to at least fail. And the reason you're failing shouldn't be because no one gave you some seed capital to just try it.
And to follow up on that, what's your personal mission in life?
So I call myself a capital activist, and I think that encapsulates everything I do, but it means that I'm on a mission to get money into the hands of the people who can do the most good with it. And I do that in various ways, whether that's through philanthropic giving or, writing checks and being an investor. My personal mission is to make sure that people aren't failing because of lack of money. Money is a tool. And using that tool to help build better communities, better lives, a better future. So for me, and through capital activism, I'm on a mission really to build a better world and just leveraging money.
So I think what makes capitalists not work is that the system designed for profit excludes some stakeholders who are not at the table. Yeah. So what's the fix that you are seeing, like from your vantage point, to make capitalism work?
So I think two things. One, I don't think capitalism has to be at the exclusion of others. So, a lot of people think on this scale, capitalism, you have socialism, you have fascism, like, very hard bloaters, right? But it's a gambit. And I think when we think about capitalism, it's 1% everybody else. And it's like, no, I think capitalism in the most philosophical sense is a system of, goods and services, right? And I talk about ecosystems. We talked about an ecosystem. I think the fix for capitalism that works for everybody is if we actually looked at it not as a zero-sum game, but really thinking about, in this part of capitalism, you're the worker and I'm the boss. In this part of capitalism, you're the boss and I'm the worker. I find that people are locked into modes in this country and probably a lot of countries around the world, right? You're in the 1% or you're in the 99%. And that's it. And that's where you're going to stay. And that's it. And I think that's why it doesn't work. I think the fix really is when we talk about democratization of capital, that's really about spreading the wealth, but spreading the wealth equals right now in this day and age, spreading power and spreading voice. And right now money equals power and it can equal voice. And the people who are getting drowned out are the people who don't have any money. So for me, the fix really is saying, let's help the people who are in that 99%, move up so that capitalism doesn't look like 1%, 99%. Maybe it looks more like 60-40. And then it's not, I'm the boss and you're the worker. Then it's like, I need you and you need me, because I always find it very fascinating. For example, everybody should be a business owner and everybody should be running a business. If we all run businesses, we have no workers, right? It's not possible. And so it's like that's one thing. Or I hear people on the other side say, everybody should go to college, right? And if everybody went to college, then everybody will get a, executive job. Not possible. If everybody in any country had a college degree, that means the person that's going to be waiting tables just has a college degree. So it's not a function of, you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to succeed. It's everybody's well educated. Everybody has a voice. I'm not saying these people have it and these people don't. It's really saying quality of life has nothing to do with the function of your job. And that's where, taking some of the steam out of, CEO, and that's pay, that's power, that's voice, and spreading it around. For me, that's the fix. I know that was a long answer, but I think that's what I start to really, really get excited about is, adding, chairs to the table, building other tables, leveraging power, sharing power dynamics. But I think that's the fix in making capitalism really work and really thinking about, not how can we make money at the exclusion of others, but making money with the inclusion of others.
This is powerful. And it reminds me of the conversation you had. I think it was facilitated by Henry Rock, where you shared a little bit of your personal story. And you talked about that power strongholds don't come tumbling down without people giving up something. Could you elaborate a little bit on this
Yes.
idea?
I say a lot of things, right? But, we have this idea that we'll stay with this 1%, 99%. The 1% is going to say, you know what, 99%, yeah, I do have a lot of power and wealth. Here's some of my wealth. If they did that out of the kindness of their heart, they still gave up something, right? They had to give up power. They had to give you the money. And it's not going to come without some pain. When we talk about people hiring or opening up the doors for a group that they historically excluded, some people will not get in by virtue of that, right? And this idea that change is painless. Like I've lost a significant amount of weight in the last 18 months. And this idea that I was going to sit on the couch, eat the cupcakes, and still lose the weight, it's going to be painful, right? Like, no, you got to stop doing this thing. You got to, maybe, it's painful the day after you have a hard workout. And this idea that we're going to make these massive changes in society and no one feels any pain and no one's disrupted and nothing, like this is just a myth. And we're saying these things to try to make the people who hold the power, feel better. And that's why we're not getting anywhere, because we're not having an honest conversation. So every time we try to present something to them, they go, "Ooh, that hurts. Oh, I'm not going to cut my salary. That hurts. I need a new yacht this month." You're like, no, I'm not going to do that because you promised me the change is going to be painless. It's not. And I think we have to stop with that narrative, period. So for me, that's one thing that I just want to ingrain into, anything. And at the end of the day, nobody really believes it. When we are talking about change, we could talk about even minor change, right? We could talk about little things like, oh, I'm going to get a haircut. If you're, a person who really likes your hair, you didn't just walk in and, pick some random haircut off the list and go, I want that one. No, there are people who weep in the chair when they get a haircut. That's a minor change. No one's world's turned upside down by a haircut. Why wouldn't we think that if we want to spread power, if we want equity, if we want everybody to have access to healthcare, it's going to be painless, let alone cheap. And so for me, I start to get really fed up with this idea that, the powerful are just going to peacefully hand over things. In other countries, we see coups, right? You see military takeovers. No one marches into, the presidential palace with flowers and says, "We'd really like your power." And they go, "Okay."
Sure. And just briefly, how does this external change connect with your proactive mission?
Well, I force change. No, honestly, one of the things that I have now been very cognizant of is, I love to read, I love to speak, but I am not willing to say something to other people that I'm not willing to do myself. So I write checks, I invest in companies, I take the risk. Sometimes I take outsized risk. Sometimes I go, yes, this is what the business is doing, but I want to give them the opportunity to fail. I do it myself, and it's, the old adage, putting your money where your mouth is. That's how I am hopefully going to be one of those external factors that says, wait, hopefully one of these investments, becomes, makes me $11 billion. And then people go, wait, I missed out. How did she do it, right? She took an outsized risk on something that didn't look like a unicorn. And oh my God, I'm not going to miss that opportunity, but that's an outside risk. So that's what I'm doing really to take, they're for me, big checks, but to other people, they're small checks. To those founders, they're, transformative.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about what you do, and I'd like to get very tangible. So what exactly do you get paid to do now? And what have been some pivotal moments on your career trajectory?
So by day, I am the CEO of Black Pearl. I get paid to literally listen to pitches and write checks. Everything we're talking about. So my days are split. I see businesses in the U.S., the Caribbean, and in Africa, mainly in healthcare. They're pitching. We write checks anywhere from ideation all the way up to Series A. And I am doing diligence. I'm looking at finances. I make financial models, but I am an investor. I make my money from that. On the other side, we also made a couple of healthcare acquisitions. So I also put on my operator hat, and I'm on a manufacturing line. I tangle with the FDA every now and then. So I get both sides of it, but on the day-to-day, I am kind of in there with businesses, really figuring out whether we're going to write a check. And if we have written a check, how do we make that money go further, and how do we help businesses grow?
So what about pivotal moments? How did you get to where you are?
Pivotal moment number one. I left corporate really when I just decided I want to do this differently. So my last corporate gig actually wasn't in healthcare, it was in electric vehicles. And it's because I left healthcare doing battery work, and I got recruited into electric vehicles because that's a key component is batteries. And I wrote patents, and I love the patent work, but I went, I don't know if I'm gonna build a career on this. I think I can make a go of this myself. That was a huge pivotal moment, right? So I took the leap, and I took the leap and I kind of got pushed. Really everything in my life was saying, if you want to do something different and impactful, but you want to get back into healthcare, do you want to go into the clinic again, or do you want to do something different? And I wanted to be an innovator. Pivotal decision number 2, I built a startup and I sold it. And selling that company, I was in the process of selling, and I met my current partner, Dr. Carl Smart. And ironically, this is where you have to be able to take feedback. He said to me, I see your company, you can do something better. And I was like, I'm selling my company. I'm going to be an executive founder, right? But that was a pivotal moment because I had talked about being an angel investor. I wrote some small checks at the time. I conducted due diligence, but I hadn't fully taken the leap because I hadn't really raised a fund. And he said, okay, let's work together. And so literally in his basement, we became partners and we came up with Black Pearl Global. So then, and I'll give you one more pivotal moment, was when I took what we were doing with Black Pearl and I got so many questions about what I did. I wrote a book, and it was during COVID. So it's called Black Angels Among Us, and it really was just taking all of what seemed like very complicated language and trying to explain it to regular people. You don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a millionaire, and if we're working together as community, that's where things really change. And so I think that last moment led me to where I am today. So now even the companies that we invest in, a lot of them have read the book, and I didn't know this. Like people, I'll walk into like their building and they'll be on the shelf. It's very like humbling. But then they'll say, we actually ended up getting a deal closed because they said, we liked what you had to say about supporting the people that work in this company. And they got better offers. They got more money offered, bigger money offers. And we focus a lot on the impact and quality of life because we are healthcare practitioners at the core of us. We care about the quality of the people.
Moving on and talking about those pivotal moments from a position of being able to sell your company. Could you talk a little bit about those early days and what helped you be positioned, first of all, to get a PhD and kind of be a practitioner in science, but also a lot of PhDs, they're very like ivory tower kind of people. They're not entrepreneurial. Make this other transition. Could you talk about?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm originally from Charlotte, and Charlotte in the 80s and the 90s, I was a part of a program called the International Baccalaureate Program, which gives you almost this world view and this world class education through your grade school years. And early on, I got identified by my kindergarten teacher.
Wow, it starts at kindergarten.
Yes, so you said early. But it's ironic because my mom had me as young. My parents were very young, but she saw my parents and my family, and she just said, don't worry, I'll take care of you. I was one of the very few children of color in the school, and she was one of the few African-American teachers. And so I think she just saw, a young family, and she just was, going to be a good person, right? And so she kind of goes, I think your daughter is special. And it takes one person kind of identifying, and actually she calls my parents in and they think I did something wrong because I'm a talker. If you can't tell, I've always been a talker. And they do this testing, and so they, when they identify early, and then I think you don't do the test until you're in like a third grade. And literally my parents are sitting there like, what did you do? And I was like, I don't know what I did. And they say, your daughter's academically gifted. We'd like to skip her ahead a couple of grades. And my parents are like, no, that would be weird. I don't know. They made that kind of like, no, I don't think so. And then they said, okay, but she's got skills in anthropology, sociology. And my parents are like, what is that, right? And what career is that? And they were like, yeah, it's some science stuff. But they put me on this track for STEM. So all of the schools that I went to from essentially third grade on had fantastic STEM facilities. And I mean, near level, like world class, I won't say world class, university level microscopes, and the education and even the professors. I had PhD level chemistry professors when I was in high school. So I had the benefit of world class literature and people with this great training that I got a great public school education. I didn't go to private school, public school. And then I went to college. And when I got to college, same thing, mentors who just went, okay. I was kind of a lazy student, a very lazy student. But they went, you've got to just do better. And so they pushed me. And then when I got into a translational medicine program, really I was a pilot group of students of color. There was only 5 people that had ever gone into that program. And this was 2005. And, in 2005, I come into this cohort that had never graduated any students of color. And it's me and to this day, like one of my best friends. And I'm looking around. I'd never taken a biology class. I was a chemist. And I decided to go into integrated biomedical science, which is not the smartest thing I could have done, actually. But I'm always up for a challenge. And I remember being there, and this program essentially takes you through medical school in the first 18 months. So every few weeks you are learning, because you have to learn how the entire body works in an integrated way. So you don't just learn immunology or, microbiology. You have to learn it all, because you have to learn how the body communicates, which is just a different way of thinking, right? So your brain is always connecting, and then you choose your specialty. But pivotal moment is when you choose your specialty. And I could not make a choice, but I chose a lab that was quite international. And this lab was headed up by scientists from around the world, but they all, I think a couple of them had MBAs. And I didn't know this at the time that this was significant, but a lot of the work they did, they were filing patents for. So they were quite entrepreneurial. And so they would be thinking about the work they were doing. So they would do surgeries, and we would, marry it with drugs. And they were thinking the economic potential of, the cancer-eating virus, if you've, ever heard of that. The first cancer-eating virus was actually discovered by one of the scientists in that lab. Wow. And he had a patent on it. Like literally, I got to a point where I was like, I don't think I'm going to do the research thing. I don't want to be a professor. And I remember one of my colleagues saying, have you thought about commercialization? And I just think, I don't know what that is. And I'd never taken a business class, because remember, I've been on the STEM track for a long, long time. And says, okay, you finish up this stuff, right? And then help me get placement into commercialization, which was fantastic. I sat literally between an accountant and a patent attorney. And I learned how to write patents, and I learned how to read financials. Amazing experiential learning, but what it taught me was I can connect the science and the amazingly important things that happen in the lab to the broader economy, and this is how we protect them. And then taking it a step further, when you work in the commercialization office at Ohio State, it's not just healthcare.
I love it. I love the explicit way you kind of leveraged this challenge, having to learn different things in different pivotal moments in your career. But there was one moment, and this is what I'm asking a lot of people trying to understand. There are people who are very successful, who are sharing, there was someone who noticed me, or I was offered this, I had this mentor who approached me, or this business partner told me this. How do you position yourself for this kind of serendipity?
I don't know if it's really positioning. I think it's about knowing two things. One, you don't know everything, so I have to keep my mind open. Every time I get a piece of feedback, especially if it's critical, I always say to myself, you can do two things with this. You can shut down and be angry, or you can listen and try to understand what they're saying. And I think when people notice you, like my partner saying, yeah, I see your business, but you could do better. I could have easily been very offended and just gone and written them off, right? And then no business, no Black Pearl, none of this stuff today, right? That's a decision nexus for me. But I think the position, and maybe the position is really humility. And I think when you have some level of intelligence or some talent, it's very easy to kind of drink your own Kool-Aid and think, I'm an expert. And I think that's what we find in the VC space, especially in healthcare. People are incredibly smart. They are incredibly talented, and they probably are the smartest person in the room. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're the smartest person in the room. And if you don't have a degree of openness to kind of go, what do I do with this feedback? Now, all feedback isn't worth taking or using, but you at least have to be able to take it in and process it. A lot of people take it and shut down. So maybe that posture, that position is really just saying, I'm navigating the world that's in a way that says, I know what I know, but there's so many things I don't know that this person, knows something I don't know, and how do I receive it? And I think that's what I try to tell myself every day. I'm not great at it all the time. And I had to recently kind of remind myself that, you have to remember that there's a lot of things that I don't know. Even when you're the expert in the office, like I was building a financial model and I just couldn't get it to work. And I was like, I am the person that's making this work. I built it, right? It's literally my thing. And I just called somebody and was like, hey, can you maybe take this and break it? And then tell me what I did wrong. 6 seconds later, they're like, oh, you just didn't do that. And I was like, oh, right? But I think the real posture is really openness. And I think it's so easy to feel like we have so much information at the tip of our fingers. It makes us really think we know or we can know everything. It's not possible. We need each other and we need other people's brains.
Thank you. This is very tangible. I'm already making mental notes how to be less defensive, more coachable.
It's hard.
It is super hard. So let's talk about Black Pearl Global Investments.
Yes.
Could you talk about your kind of ideal company that you're seeking to attract? And how do they reach out to you if they're listening or watching us right now?
So with Black Pearl, we like to say our ideal company does one of three things, or maybe all three things. It improves life, it improves outcomes, or reduce costs. So if you are improving outcomes, that means whatever you're working on is going to make people's lives better. I think I messed that up. Increase access. There we go. More people will have access to X, or you're reducing costs, because we really don't want good healthcare to just be unattainable because of price. So that's our first kind of, set of things. And if you do one, please call us. If you do two, please call us. And if you do three, definitely call us, right? But then after that, we take that next step down and say, where are you doing it and who are you doing it for? So we don't do drug and drug development, but everything else in healthcare is really fair game for us. But we really want to keep our eye on quality of life for the patient. So we are really thinking through how you impact lives. And a few years ago, I guess now a decade ago probably, the triple bottom line was the thing for everybody. We still think about that. Are you good to the environment? Are you good to the people? And you make profits, because we actually don't call ourselves an impact fund. We really think about, though, how we are impacting everything that the business we invest intersects with. But people can submit their pitches or contact us straight through our website. So we are an open pitch company. So at any given time, if you have an idea and you want to be contacted, you either send us an email to info@blackpearlglobalinvestments.com, or you can fill out our contact us form and they'll start the conversation. But we are unlike a lot of VC firms that only take warm leads. We take completely cold leads. And I think our last 3 or 4 investments have been all cold.
So let me ask you a Kepler-sponsored question. And we talked a little bit about it on the phone. Like, how does technology fit into decisions, especially for a company transitioning from something smaller to something that needs to have like a national or global impact? And from a VC perspective, where does it sit, like assessing the technology capabilities?
Well, one, technology is critical. You can't scale really if you don't have, some tech-enabled something. Because, what are they going to hire 1 million people? No, you need the tech to work, and the tech to work well, because when I'm evaluating it, I am not a tech person. I don't consider myself a tech person. But I do like to get in and really start to understand how this is enabling something. So from a VC perspective, when I look at my check, especially when people say I'm going to use this check to scale up our technology, you can sink a lot of money into a platform very, very quickly with bells and whistles, right? So from a non-tech perspective, I'm looking at user friendliness, right? Because I'm a non-tech person that's going to come in and, play with it and see what I can see. Was it easy? Was it fun? Was it fast? Did I get where I needed to go, right? And it's important and maybe I'm not completely non-techie, but I'm not going to be able to get on the back end of anything and help you with anything. We do have other people that we will call, and then they will come in and say, this is going to be a really expensive build if you're going to do X, Y, and Z, right? Or they will say, I don't think you want to do it this way. And they'll say a much more elegant way of doing this is this, or you are on the wrong platform altogether because when you first built this, it was cost constrained, and blah, 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 all of those things that I can't necessarily vet out. So I come at it from I might be a user one day, or I might be a patient one day, or whatever. We bring in real experts that know what they're doing. That's a big part of due diligence. Everything looks good and shiny on the front end of things. It could be a complete mess behind the curtain. And we use the tech people to kind of come in and just do an evaluation to say, yes, no, this could scale easily or not, because I don't have the capabilities of knowing that. And the last thing we'd want to do is write a big check thinking we're going to go national or international, and then we add 3 more people to the platform and it crashes. And so it's critical, really critical to anything we're going to do, because you don't become a unicorn without the technology.
So that's one of actually, again, on the Kepler theme, we have an advisory board meeting coming up, and this is what advisors have been pushing Kepler, like to explore relationships with VCs so that they call on you when there is a need to do due diligence. So how did you build this technical expertise? Is it in-house expertise or some other form of relationships?
It's a mix. So sometimes it's stuff like this. So it's like, oh, I think I know a guy, and I pick up the phone. But because I've been in hospitals, hospital administration, we'll, every now and then we'll call a name brand company and say, hey, do you have somebody who works here? We don't carry a lot of in-house tech staff. We have somebody that can fix our tech problems. We do have a minority owner who is a Microsoft executive, and he can navigate some things. And so, of course, he comes with connections. But ultimately, I have to get in community. I have to come to, tech talks and see who's doing what, or who's working on what, or, who's pitching what, and see, oh, you just built a whole platform. Oh, you might be interesting. You should keep your name over here, right? It's important for me to know what's going on and who has the capabilities. And even, we haven't done it in a while. We used to do vendor calls. And just build our own little database because, inevitably we're going to need accountants. We're going to need tech people, and tech it could be anything in tech, right? And I've recently learned that you can't say I need a tech person. Like, you need what kind of tech person, right? So even knowing the various types of people, just having a Rolodex and saying, hey, we have a project potentially coming on. And on the flip side of that, we also have, when we write a check into companies and they're scaling, the last thing we want to see them do is hire a bunch of people that aren't going to work for them or that won't fit the bill at the time. So it helps us to go, hey, we know the Kepler team. You should hire them to help you get this together for now. Then we're saving money. Our money's being spent smarter. So for us, it's all about building relationships by being in community, because if I can support local, I always will. If I can support small, I always will. And then on the other side of it, we get a lot of people that just say, hey, just keep us in mind. So I'll keep you in mind.
I appreciate it. Just as we're talking about this startup experience, like what kind of experience startup got with working with you, could you talk about things they should not do, or what are the typical mistakes that founders make when they approach you with a pitch?
I don't know who started this cliche or this saying of if you ask a person for advice, they give you money, and if you ask them for money, they give you advice. I don't know who said that, but they
You
should
don't
stop
buy
saying
into
that.
this?
No,
Okay.
because one, I'm a very direct person. So if you tell me, hey, I just want your advice, I'm just going to give you advice. Like, you didn't tell me you were looking for a check. And I think they're thinking, oh, if I tell them a really good pitch, then they're going to say, oh, you're looking for an investor? And maybe sometimes that happens. But at the end of the day, if what you're doing is raising, I should know you're raising. Like, people who just never get to the point, and I'm just saying, okay, how much are you, I've had people pitch to me, and I say, are you looking to raise? Yes. How much? About. Oh, what are we, horseshoes? Like, what are we doing here? And they don't know what they want, which tells me you're not going to know what you're going to do with my money. So that's a big red flag, because time is, really, really of the essence. So it's like, I'm not saying 5 seconds into a conversation, hey, I'm raising money, but at the same time, it's have an ask, kind of get to the point and say, I have people, and I tell them, don't ever be afraid to say, are you currently investing? Because if I'm not, I will just tell you, no, we've, kind of invested all. And I think you should be comfortable asking anybody who says they're an investor or a VC that question. Are you currently writing checks? Or if they have a fund, how much dry powder do you have? How much money do you have left to invest? Because if they say none, you're going to be pitching for no reason. And they're just going to get a really good story. And you're going to get maybe some good advice. The other thing I think people do it's really a problem is they lie. The fake it till you make it is terrible. If I ask you a direct question and you don't know the answer, say, I don't know. Instead of giving me 45 minutes of nothing, and I'm just kind of going, what in the hell, right? That has happened. And I think, I've had to stop people and say, okay, yes or no, or, I just want a number, because they are so used to, they don't want to say the wrong thing. And I go, nope, done. But at the same time, if you can't be honest with me as your investor, I don't trust you. So when we talk about building relationships can't exist without trust. And an investor relationship is one of the longest lasting relationships you're going to have. Relationships are two-way streets, and they're probably three-way streets, right? Because you've got to also use a little bit of emotional intelligence in when to use, make your ask, make your direct ask, say, no, this is all I'm interested in, because it's like,
It's not honest.
It's not honest. And I don't think people understand when you make a direct ask to someone, you're asking them to extend themselves and put themselves at risk. So the ask might feel risky to you, but I'm asking you to conduct a risk. Like me opening up my Rolodex to a company or to making connections sounds like such a trivial thing, right? But people don't understand that if you as a company destroy a relationship, that's one less LP that I have, which could mean that's $12 million less that I'm going to get, right? And so it's like, I have to be careful when I open up or make connections. And so if I don't know you, I need to know you before I'm going to make that connection.
Thank you. I'm glad we had this clarifying piece. So advice is not dead, or at least relationship building is not.
I don't love giving advice anymore.
You don't?
Because if there's no relationship, advice is just dead, right? Because It's like, I feel like valuable advice comes from knowing the person. Because you could tell me a situation and then like kind of a flash in the pan, I can tell you what I think. But it's not advice, right? I can tell you what I would do, but if I'm not you and I don't know enough about you, it can be completely disjointed.
You're becoming a professional mentor. One of the things mentors do, they don't give advice.
Oh, well.
There is the whole thing, tame your advice monster.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's about being with a person, seeing the world through their eyes, being in the experience and helping them figure things out versus giving them a quick solution. Just to complete this venture funding piece, how would you describe the current environment? So we are in late October 2023. Mm-hmm. So is it a good time to raise money from your perspective? And what are the trends for 2024?
Well, 2024 is going to be better than 2023. Okay. I think I think whatever slide happened in 2023, like some sectors really suffered. And I looked at the stats a couple months ago, and it's like venture capital was down like 84% year over year. I think that's gotten better since I last looked. But yes, it's a good time to start thinking about your raise, unless you have a very short list of targets. The funding year is probably now done. Like we've probably spent all our capital for this year. We're not going to make write any new checks. January though, so we're looking now because January is coming. So yes, it's October, but it's next year already for us. So we already in our mind are starting to line up how much capital are we going to deploy into who? And what are we going to focus on? So for me, it's always like October, November. That's when I'm starting to gear up my Q1, Q2, Q3. So by the time I'm in June of next year, I will know probably every check I'm going to write for all of 2024. So that's a fun time. And then on the trend side, I have been really interested. There was, of course, everything AI connected was getting all the money. I feel like that's died down a little bit. But maybe it's just not with all the other things going on in the world, we just don't hear it as much. But I feel like that's the one thing that keeps sticking around is that that's the one buzzword that's still there. I mean, a few years ago it was metaverse and everybody was in the metaverse and then apparently Meta died. I don't know, not Meta the company. Please don't come after me. I have no money. The metaverse kind of stuff. And then Web3, I'm sure there are people still doing Web3 things, but that kind of went to the side. Like I didn't even know what Web3 was, and I was getting pitched it like every day, and I was like, I don't know what this means. But kind of this machine learning, AI. I see artificial intelligence, and that seems to be something that people are really glomming onto and really trying to figure out how we leverage the potential of the technological platforms to do things that humans are doing in a smarter, more elegant way. Now, I think there's a lot of room for improvement, like not just to cheat and write papers. I sometimes lecture at business schools and it's like, no, don't just use the AI to write your, final. But, how do we get smarter about this in healthcare? How do we, create better predictive models to keep people out of the hospital? So I think in the VC world, we want to see institutions speed it up. And it's sometimes not even the FDA. So I own a contact lens manufacturing facility. And we make contacts. We make prescription contacts. And one of the big, hairy monsters is online prescriptions. So the technology has been there for 12 years where you could, get in front of a computer and, you go through the steps, the cameras or whatever read the prescription and you're done. And it gives you a prescription and the accuracy is great. Now, not most, a lot of doctors will say, oh, it's not the same. Okay, nothing's the same, right? But it is kind of a tried and true technology. And we keep standing in the way in healthcare. And it's because, one person had a bad experience. We now have some doctors' offices that are completely telehealth. There we go. And it's like, if the doctor isn't even in the office, then what's the difference, right? There isn't. But it's how do we, as healthcare, I think one of the trends is I'm hoping that there's, going to be continued discussion, especially with the FDA, to stop standing in the way of technological adoption, because if we want to increase access, we have to be able to leverage technology in a way that is, everybody has a phone in their pocket. Stop standing in the way of that. Stop saying, oh, it's going to be X, Y, and Z. There are some cases where it's not that complicated. And I'm hoping that this conversation really starts to heat up next year, because that's where I'll be putting my money in the VC space.
It's very curious that you're talking about this. I talked with one doctor in this podcast, Joel Solonikio, and he said that 96% of population in the world do not have access to a doctor, nurse, or medical facility. And for them, having access to something like ChatGPT or whatever technical tool is the best thing versus having no healthcare. Yeah. And he is a firm believer that this is where the future is, globally.
So globally, it's funny because that technology I'm talking about, every other country actually allows it. except for the US. Ironically, if you were to buy your prescription lenses ex-US, for example, you could renew your prescription, and then if they'll ask if you're in the United States. And if you say yes, and it's like you have to go to a doctor, right? And it's like we're literally trying to stand in the doorway of progress. The very first company we invested in when Black Pearl first opened its fund doors was actually a telehealth platform that was developed for refugees in Syria. And they use kind of a chat function. That was the cheapest way to connect with a medical professional. But for 25 cents, you could get medical advice.
Awesome. So let's talk about the future. What are your immediate plans professionally?
Well, complete departure from an immediate departure. I'll still do all the stuff with Black Pearl Global, and I have another fund called Equilibrium where we make social impact investments on the social determinants of health. I'm likely going to launch another fund sometime in the near future, but it's going to look at real estate. I know, like, why not, right? Always learning. But this will really think about, again, quality of life, but around historically Black colleges and the community surrounding them, but helping them build up their infrastructure, at making those communities a little bit safer, better, more livable. And then I'm also, again, kind of back to the future a little bit and thinking about clean tech and green tech. So I'm really starting to really figure out how I'm going to get involved. Really, either it's going to be via investment or maybe a new venture, and really participate on that side of things. Because again, if our environment isn't healthful, it doesn't matter if I have good health if I can't breathe the air. So those are two areas where I'm really excited about. The fund will come on, and I'm really excited about it. I'm about a third of the way fundraising with that one. It'll be my largest fund to date, around $100 million. So I'm excited about that. And then on the flip side, on the green clean side, I mean, there's so many cool projects that are starting to pop up in the US that, it's really about me figuring out. I'd love to really understand the intersection between some clean technologies and like building hospitals.
I love how your answer right now and kind of your interests actually tie back to your childhood that you talked about, where it's not one thing, right? It has to be several things and making connections between them. This is awesome. But outside of work, what are your passions and interests?
Right now, travel. I really, I just enjoy new food and new cultures. So that's what I do when I'm not working. And sometimes I travel and then work where I am. So it's travel. I also have started working out more. So people will find me in a gym almost 7 days a week now. So fitness, I'll never be like a fitness model or anything, but that's really become a passion of mine because I'm very interested in what our bodies can do in our later years, because so much of your longevity is tied to, how well you're doing. So I'm not so much interested in, having a six pack and looking great when I'm 40. I'm really interested in when I'm 90, being able to still, function completely fine and walk up the stairs and, do all the regular things. And that's a function of how well I treat my body today.
Really cool. What's your favorite book and why?
My favorite book, it's funny. My mother is a pastor. And it's funny because she asked me this question. I said, my favorite book is the Bible. And it kind of is, but, for very weird reasons. There are really fascinatingly weird stories in the Bible.
Oh, for sure. It could have been banned under some of the...
Exactly. So, that's one. And there's spiritual health, and I'm not making fun of the religion at all. But I was like, it's very fascinating to read, like the stories in the Bible, like just as like a story. But lately I have been rereading, again, The Count of Monte Cristo. I've read it several times. I don't know, every time I kind of read it, I kind of just get something new from it. Just being a prisoner. I don't know. Every few years I read it, and I've seen the movies. It actually made me go read the book Chevalier. The French, it's a Black French musician. So it's funny, like these books kind of always connect to each other, but it's like The Count of Monte Cristo is something I read, I think, when I was in maybe the 9th or 10th grade. And every few years I read it again, which is a very weird thing. So I have a well-worn copy at home.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Honestly, don't worry about failing. And I know people say that so much. Failure is a part of success, blah, 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 blah. But when I was younger, I was very, very afraid of public failure. That's really, my younger self spent a lot of time worrying about fitting in and not failing. So it's almost like I didn't exist for a little while. And now it's really about, just doing it. And, kind of failure be damned. Because if you don't go big, you're not going to fail or, do anything. And, I always love the saying, quiet women don't change the world. And I'm not a quiet woman.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shante. It's been a pleasure having you on this podcast.
Thank you, Igor. This was great.
In this episode of the Health Tech Crew podcast, we delve deep into invaluable insights from Dr. Shante Williams. Our heartfelt appreciation goes out to her for enlightening us. A big nod to Kepler team, industry leaders in crafting superior, HIPAA-compliant software solutions for the cutting-edge world of health tech. Remember, trailblazing healthcare firms trust Kepler to ensure excellence in every line of code. Stay tuned and buckle up as we navigate through more of healthcare's technological vanguard in our upcoming episodes. Until the next time.